各位同事，我哋夠鐘又夠人。
Members, it's time, and we have a quorum. I call to order the meeting of the panel on environmental affairs. Item 1, information papers issued since the last meeting. Since last meeting, the Secretary has issued one paper. That's tables and graphs showing the import and retail prices of major oil products from March 2021 to February 2023 provided by the administration. Yesterday, I received a letter from Mr. Edward Leung about the power outage involving the Hong Kong Electric. He would like to have an early discussion. And also we need to consider the scheme of control agreements. So that has to do with items for discussion at the next meeting. That's item 2. Now, because of the Hong Kong Electric incident and because I've received a letter from Mr. Edward Leung, so I've discussed with the administration. So at the next meeting, we will first consider the 2023 interim review of the scheme of control agreements with the two power companies. And in under the item, we could also consider the Hong Kong Electric incident. So apart from the scheme of control agreements with the two power companies, the second item to take up at the next meeting is proposed amendments to Wild Animals Protection Ordinance. The next meeting will be on the 22nd of May, Monday at 2:30. Please note, members. Item 3 on the agenda, charging network in support of the popularization of electric vehicles in Hong Kong. If you wish to speak, members, please press the request to speak button. I'd like to welcome the administration for joining us on this item. Now, there are two documents. The first one is the administration's paper on charging network in support of the popularization of electric vehicles in Hong Kong. And the second document is the background brief prepared by the Secretariat. We have Mr. Jie Chin Wan leading his team. We have Dr. Kenneth Leung, Mr. Raymond Wu, Deputy Director, Mr. Stephen Siu, Assistant Director, Dr. Sunny Zhang, Principal Environmental Protection Officer, and Dr. Benny So, Principal Environmental Protection Officer. The Secretary will say a few words, and then the department will do a PowerPoint presentation. Mr. Chair, please. Thank you, Madam Chair. Transport accounts for about 20% of total emission in Hong Kong, so we need to develop a low-carbon green transport. This is very important for achieving the target of carbon neutrality. In the past, we have announced the Hong Kong roadmap. We have published the Hong Kong roadmap on popularization of electric vehicles, clean air plan for Hong Kong 2035, and Hong Kong's climate action plan 2050. We have covered various policy directions and future targets in different areas, promoting the adoption of new energy transport technologies to guide Hong Kong towards zero vehicular emissions before 2050. And attain carbon neutrality. Now, to promote EVs, I'm sure you are aware of the one important factor, that is whether we have adequate and convenient charging facilities. So we need to build a comprehensive charging network in supporting the popularization of EVs. That's crucial. That's why we are coming back here today to report to you on the progress of our work in this regard. And also, we would like to listen to your views. So I will now invite Dr. Kenneth Leung to do a PowerPoint presentation. Thank you, Mr. Leung. Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'll use a few slides to give you an outline of our strategy about the entire charging network. Now, there are different types of EVs. They have different modes of operation. They have different charging needs as a result. And also because the battery sizes vary for different EV types. That's why we have a strategy for each specific EV type, private vehicles as well as commercial vehicles. We have to look at their mode of operation, and then we have to design the network accordingly. Now, starting from the left, we have private cars. There are now over 50,000 private EVs in Hong Kong, so it's quite a great percentage of all the EVs. Now, for electric private cars or light vehicles and motorcycles, usually they are parked at car parks. So that's why in car parks of private housing estates or places of work or places where motorists may frequent, we would like to provide charging facilities here. For these types of vehicles, the charging facilities is really to, supplement their needs, because for such EVs, usually on a day they travel for less than 100 kilometers. Now, after one charge, usually the driving range is about 400 to 500 kilometers. That means after one charge, private EVs need not be charged for another few days or even a week. So we believe, therefore, this charging strategy is enough to meet the needs of private cars and light vehicles. For other heavy vehicles such as coach buses, heavy commercial vehicles, now usually they do not have fixed parking spaces. If there is a depot, of course, they could then install charging facilities there, or they could go to parking meters specifically for heavy vehicles. We will be installing charging facilities at these metered parking spaces for heavy vehicles. As for public transport vehicles, that is franchise buses and public light buses. Now, for franchise buses and green minibuses, they have fixed routes. So the charging strategy is that for franchise bus companies at their existing depots or in future depots, charging facilities will be installed. As for green minibuses, we will be installing charging facilities, not at just any PLB stands, but at the terminus, that is at the public transport interchange, because there will be more space for us to add charging facilities. Hopefully then, our strategy will be enough to meet the charging needs for these two types of public transport vehicles. And then next, commercial vehicles without fixed parking spaces, that is taxis and other commercial vehicles. Now, for taxis, they operate almost round the clock, actually close to 20 hours in a day. So they travel long distances. They will be in all parts of the territory. So that's why we need to build a quick charging network that covers the entire territory. So we have these four different strategies. Hopefully then it could meet the charging needs of different types of EVs. Now I'm going to go into a bit more detail about the respective strategies. First, for private charging network, usually is we have the EVHHS, the HSS, we have invested $3.5 billion by the end of 2027. We should be able to install charging facilities at about 140,000 parking spaces. And then the next strategy is that since 2021, now, if we want, we offer gross floor area concessions for underground parking. For the concession, there must be charging facilities for 100% of the parking spaces. There are now some 7,700 parking spaces included in applications, and some 33,000 parking spaces. Well, the facilities have been installed, and so in 5 years there should be 210,000 private car parking spaces with charging facilities to cope with the growing EV fleet. And then for government premises, we have provided medium chargers in 1,000 parking spaces in government car parks. And in this year's policy address, it's been announced that there will be an additional 7,000 charging facility. There will be charging facilities at another 7,000 parking spaces in government buildings in the next 3 years. And for buildings yet to be built, instead of the 70% requirement, it will be 100% for charging facilities for all parking spaces. And then in March this year, we have just completed we have just revised the circular on government green buildings. That means for all government buildings in future, they must provide 100% medium charging facilities for all parking spaces for private cars and light vehicles. And then there's also We're also starting marketization of charging facilities. We'll start a pilot scheme in the second half of this year. So the government will take the lead to promote marketization of charging facilities. And after the government starts charging, others suppliers could also start charging for their services, because now some suppliers are providing free charging services. Last year, we launched the EV charging easy mobile application. Well, there's not much information yet on charging spaces, because for the 1,600 chargers, we need to install computer equipment before the information could go online. So we'll be including information on the existing 1,600 chargers in the app. We're also in discussion with private operators. Hopefully, they will also provide information on their charging facilities on this platform for public use. On promoting or on expanding the e-commercial vehicle charging network, ECV network, first we have to consider whether there is the availability of suitable EV models in Hong Kong, because we have right-hand drive, but then most commercial vehicles are left-hand drive. That's the case on the mainland and in Europe. That's why we need to seek the supply of EV models with right-hand drive, and in the past there are not enough models for selection, and we are in discussion with the manufacturers. And then we are seeing more and more heavy vehicles such as 24-ton or 30-ton trucks that will be coming to Hong Kong. As for the price differential between EVs and conventional fuel-propelled vehicles. Now, electric charging definitely is cheaper than fuel, so that's an appeal there. But then we need to provide sufficient charging facilities, otherwise it's not possible to operate heavy vehicles. We are fully aware of such a need from the sector. As for e-buses, as I said, we would help bus companies to install charging facilities at their depots. And in the paper, we also mentioned that under the New Energy Transport Fund, NET Fund, we are going to offer subsidy to help franchise bus companies to replace their existing buses with e-buses. As for public light buses, there is an $80 million pilot scheme. At one of the PLB stand, we are starting to provide charging facilities. The pilot location is in Kowloon Tong. So in the second half of this year, we're going to start the trial on ELBs. That's for charging. And then the Transport Department has already approved 3 different types of PLBs, EPLBs for selection by PLB operators. So the plan is going well as scheduled. Now in Lantau and Sai Kung, well, for the e-taxis, there are many taxi stands in Tung Chung, not just red taxis, but green taxis can also use the quick chargers. And then Sai Kung also covers Cheung Kwan O. In Chai Kung, there are 2 locations for quick charging. We are already working on that. So apart from the 10 or so charging locations in different government buildings, we're in discussion with different government departments, so we could provide another 30 quick chargers. We're also working on converting petrol filling stations into quick charging stations. There are 180 petrol filling stations in Hong Kong. Some of these stations will see their lease expiring soon. So we are going to identify suitable PFS and convert them into quick charging stations. For PFS with still a long lease, we will encourage the operators to add chargers where feasible. That is, if the stations are big enough, they may have space to add chargers at existing petrol filling stations, because PFS have the advantage of having a large distribution network across the territory. So we therefore would like to provide chargers as suitable PFS. And under the net fund, we would like to propose 2 amendments. Now, with application for trial, now we accept applications from the transport sector. But then, as you see, there's mention of hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. We have set aside $200 million for trial applications of hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. Well, such vehicles actually are more expensive than EVs, and the charging facilities also cost more. If we go by the existing limit of $12 million, then we can't have many projects. So that's why we propose to increase the subsidy limit to $50 million or 75% of the total cost, whichever is lower. This will allow operators interested in joining the trial scheme to come up with a more suitable trial scheme. And then in the third column, trial schemes for charging of e-taxis. As we know, we've talked to the sector much about the suitable charging mode for them, and they have offered various suggestions. So that's why we propose to include this new item in under the fund for application for trials, and it's not just public transport operators. Perhaps charging operators could also work with taxi operators to make applications. So the application will be on project basis, and the limit is to $20 million. That's the subsidy ceiling. And then for our current subsidy model, first the applicant has to engage a consultant, and then first we have to engage a consultant to come up with a list of approved models of new energy vehicles. Now, there are already quite a number of new energy vehicle models approved by the Transport Department, so we want to streamline the procedure, because the Transport Department already allows the sale of such vehicles. So as long as these vehicles are available in the market, then there's no need to go through a consultant for the selection. So the applicant could just propose these models in their application. Now, for franchise bus companies and heavy vehicle operators, if we set a limit of $12 million, it's hard for them to buy any vehicle. So that's why we propose to remove the ceiling for applications involving franchised bus companies and heavy vehicle operators. But then we're not subsidizing the full cost of the vehicle. We haven't yet decided on the amount yet. We will be working out the subsidy amount later. And the subsidy will not be given one-off. It will be given on an annual basis. That means the applicant must first clock up some certain mileage. For now, we plan to give out the subsidy over 5 years. So in any case, we will leave it to the Net Fund Steering Committee for further consideration. That's all by way of presentation. If I may sum up, now the new energy vehicles developing really quickly. We have decided to review every 5 years, but now we would shorten it to every 3 years so that we can come up with new strategies quicker. Thank you.
There are 12 members who have pressed the button: Mr. Chan Xiu-hong, Andrew Lam, Chan Yue-ming, Ran Ki-yik, Chan Pui-leung, Lau Kok-fan, Tony Che, Gary Cheng, Kok Wai-keung, and Kenneth Lau. Chen Kak-kan and myself, 4 minutes per person, question and answer included. Mr. Chan, please. I am a consultant of the CLP. The number of newly registered EVs has been increasing recently from 2018. and it increased to almost 20,000 in 2022. 1 out of 2 newly registered vehicles is EVs. Until the end of last year, there are over 50,000 EVs, which accounts to about 7.8% of the total number of vehicles in Hong Kong. There is significant progress, but there are insufficient charging facilities. Out of the over 50,000 EVs in Hong Kong, there are only about 6,000 chargers in Hong Kong, public chargers. So 10 EVs are fighting for 1 chargers in general. So I agree with the government effort in promoting the popularization of chargers in Hong Kong. I have a simple question. Will the administration set up a goal for the ratio of EV to chargers as a kind of target of vision? Say, set a target of the ratio of EV to chargers, including public and private chargers. Do you have such a goal? Second question. For government premises and quarters, they are not installed with chargers. Do you have any plan for this? From the government information that we receive, there is no significant progress in the installation of chargers and government premises. As there are not a lot of EVs in the government fleet. Another point, in the Public Works Subcommittee, a lot of public projects have been approved in these few years, and there will be more in the coming years. But the administration say that only 30% of the parking spaces will be equipped with chargers. I'm not sure if the situation will be improved in the future. If this is the case, how do we request the private premises to install chargers at all of their parking spaces? If you ask them to equip all parking spaces with chargers, perhaps you ask the departments to install chargers phase by phase and equip the parking spaces with mechanics or electrical ancillary facilities. My last question, there's a discussion on the automatic parking spaces in Sham Shui Po. Automated parking is the top priority. With such system in place, there cannot be charger at those places. Is that correct? Can the cars be parked automatically and then be charged automatically as well? Please leave time for the officials to respond. Secretary, please. On the target of ratio, there is different ratio set up by different places in the world. So we target that the parking spaces in Hong Kong will be installed with chargers. In the short term, there will be over 200,000 parking spaces equipped with chargers. As for government premises and projects, we do have a strategy for new projects. If there are parking spaces, they will have to be installed with chargers. As for other premises, we will encourage them to install chargers. So we do have such goals in place, but we need time to install chargers at existing premises. As for automated parking system, I invite Dr. Leung to supplement. We need to discuss with the Transport Department on the automated parking system, and we are looking into how we can install chargers at these automatic parking spaces because there is a safety concern. After the car is parked and if fire comes out, it's difficult for us to retrieve the vehicles. So we need to communicate with the relevant department. When it's technically feasible, we will install the chargers at the automatic parking spaces. Mr. Andrew Lam, I would like to talk about the EV charging at home subsidy scheme, because we want to encourage people to charge their vehicles at home before using the public chargers. But there are a few points that I don't quite understand. You have set out a few goals. There are 140,000, 150,000. Just now, the secretary said that there will be over 210,000 parking spaces installed with chargers in 5 years. My question is this. As far as I understand, in the private housing estates in the territory, there are less than 700,000 parking spaces for private cars and light goods vehicles. With your target of 210,000 parking spaces with chargers, the diesel vehicles will be phased out. For estates who are unwilling to install chargers, what is the problem? How do we resolve their concerns or worries or problems such that we can encourage them to install chargers? If not, can we make legislation amendments to deal with the issue? Thank you. Secretary, please. Thank you for your question. As you know, for newly built government premises, we do have such requests for installation of chargers at parking spaces. As for existing government premises, we do have a plan in place, but we have no intention to install chargers at all parking spaces across the territory. We will promote marketization of charging. That is to say, when the number of EVs increase, there will be an increased demand for charging, naturally. So when we look at the electricity rate, some people charge their EVs at home. The price difference between fossil or fuel and electricity, there is a difference. So when the charging services is marketized, there will be a significant decrease in the charging fees. So there will be increasing number of chargers. The link REIT said that they will install 3,000 chargers. And we have helped some private premises to install chargers, and they pay us in return. So in terms of strategy, we will be doing this in such a way. And you've mentioned about ECVs. As Dr. Leung has said, for ECVs, we will build quick charging network across the territories for ECVs, because ECVs cannot be parked at a single place for a long time. E-buses will need such facilities, and e-taxis as well. The e-buses may be charged at the depots at night, and they do not have to be charged in the daytime. So there can be shared use of chargers between taxis and buses to support e-buses and e-taxis operation. That is our general strategy. Thank you. Chang Yue-ming, please. Thank you for coming, for giving us this presentation on the strategy on charging network across the territory. In 2035, there will be no newly registered fuel-propelled vehicles. There is a target that, the number of newly registered EVs has been more than that of the fuel vehicles in 2022. There are a few questions that I would like the Secretary to respond. For electrification of vehicles, there has to be electrified of public transport. For charging networks for green minibus in the new territories, there will be a need for the use of land in the new territories as well. As I've mentioned in previous meetings, there is a lacking in the power supply in the new territories power grid. CLP has told me that only a certain number of applications for power grid in some villages can be allowed. Sometimes quick chargers are not approved in some Lean Territory villages. I have had a meeting with the CLP recently. Some villages have their power supply exceed the prescribed limit. And for installation of power supply, the time needed is 18 to 20 months. I hope that the administration can review comprehensively the capacity of power supply in new territories because it affects the timetable for implementation of powers or charging facilities. My second question. The government says that they have 150 EVs in the government fleet. As a leader in the promotion of popularization of EVs, the government fleets should enhance the electrification of their vehicles. I hope that the Secretary can talk about the goals of the electrification of government fleet. Thank you. Thank you for your question.
And also in certain villages, because of the power supply capacity, there is need to add additional capacity, and it will take some 18 to 22 months. Yes, we are aware of that. And as I said earlier, for commercial vehicles, we need to provide a quick charging network. And there have to be certain charging facilities in the rural areas and the NT, definitely. And as we plan for these facilities, of course, we will work together with the power companies on power supply and so on. In particular, we have to consider the current power supply situation. Say if there are new spots, or maybe there's need to make plans to boost the power supply capacity. Definitely, we're going to discuss with the power companies about that. Thank you, Ms. Chen, for your suggestions. On the government car fleet, well, last year, we've already set a new policy. When departments buy new private vehicles, unless there are specific uses where EVs are not feasible, then they have to buy EVs when they buy new vehicles. So in the next few years, therefore, we expect there will be a surge in the percentage of EVs in the government car fleet, because most government cars are actually private cars. Mr. Frankie Yik, thank you. Since the this paper is out, media have expressed concern about paragraph 10, that is marketization of charging facilities, charging services. So the government is going to charge for such services. I support that myself. I agree that will help to speed up the installation of charging facilities. I find out from many private car park operators that they're not charging any fees to follow the government's practice, but then they will have to pay the power bill tariff themselves. So that's why they won't install so many chargers. But if in future they're able to recover costs, they may therefore install more chargers. And then people will just park their cars there, they go shopping, and go for a meal while their cars are being charged. So I know you are going to start that at government car parks. But apart from charging for these charging services, how will you make sure that private motorists will move their cars after they are fully charged as soon as possible? Because we've talked about problems in the past where people just take up parking spaces with chargers, and others cannot really use the chargers as a result. Now for the EHSS, that is the EV charging at home subsidy scheme, many asked if there will be a second round of the scheme. So, Secretary, can you tell us about that? Will there be another round of the scheme? As for the one-for-one replacement scheme, many talking about it because the scheme is coming to an end by April next year. And some say that the models they want, well, there's a short supply of the vehicle. So can the scheme be extended? Because I want to switch to EVs, but then there's no supply of the model I want. So 3 questions there. Secretary, please. On EV charging at home subsidy scheme, I will take it up. My colleagues will take up the other questions. EV charging at home subsidy scheme, EHSS, is been extended from phase 1 to phase 2. And as we go along, we are going to go for marketization of charging for services. Therefore, the government has no plan for phase 3 of the scheme. Thank you. Madam Chair, the first question on the management of parking spaces with chargers, I think is actually just a matter of management. For EVs, now when the plug is plugged in, then the EV charger is able to identify vehicles and will know how long the car has been parked there and has been charged there. With current technology, so we will be able to enhance the management of parking spaces with chargers. So we want to go for high-tech approach in improving the management of parking spaces with chargers. The other question on the one-for-one replacement scheme, yes, we're watching the market situation closely. Yes, it's May, and the scheme is to expire by the end of March next year. We're going to make an announcement at an appropriate point about the arrangement of the one-for-one replacement scheme. Now, if I may follow up, for management, there has to be some sort of penalty system. That is, if you charge your car but still you won't move your vehicle, then there should be some sort of fine. So to force them to take their car away. Well, that's what the market is doing. Actually, they are trying to make motorists to drive away the cars after they're fully charged. Well, so it's already done in the market. How come the government's not doing it? Well, that's also the plan we have. We're going the same way. And for all future government car parks, there will be medium charges, so there won't be the problem you mentioned. That is, parking spaces charges are taken up for prolonged periods. No, it won't happen anymore. But of course, we need to provide quick charges for, say, taxis, public light buses, and so on. So then, in that case, for such quick charges, we need to have some sort of a management approach. If people just take up the parking spaces for too long, they have to be fined or something. Well, don't consider it. Just do it. You know, it's not about a long term. It's about doing it immediately. Now, as at the end of last year, in the 18 districts across the territory, there is not an even distribution of charges across the territory. Now, in Kwun Tong, there are over 1,000 charges, almost the highest number. And then Tin Mun, there are just 96 charges. Tai Po, only 67 charges. So, on the charging network, I'm sure you have a comprehensive plan for the distribution of standard, medium, or quick chargers in the 18 districts across the territory. But then the public do not have the information. I wonder if you could provide more information to the public so they will know, well, in the district where I live, there will be so many charges in future. Or in a place where I work, I know how many charges there will be in the district. So people may want to know about the information. Now, for quick charges, charging is supposed to be quick, so the turnover should be quick. In that case, why don't you require the installation of quick chargers across the board instead? As for street parking meters, for the 1 hour or 2 hour parking metered spaces, is it possible for the parking meters to provide charging function as well? Then is it feasible technically? because then it will help to address part of the issue. Well, I'll ask my colleagues to supplement on the technical aspects of the scheme, but I will first say something by way of principle. Now, we're going for marketization of charging services, so you don't need to be too concerned whether there are too few chargers in a particular district. Now, if there's a big shopping mall, definitely more chargers will be installed there. So as long as there's marketization of charging services, in spots where the government has not provided chargers, if there's a demand, then definitely there will be supply in the market. So that's why marketization is an important strategy. And as to why we're not going for quick chargers for all spaces, let me explain that. Now, for medium chargers, 7 kilowatt, quick chargers, 120 kilowatts. So the power supply, the power demand is more than 10 times. Now, for quick chargers, a car can be charged quickly. So in an hour, in theory, maybe then 2 or 3 cars could be charged. It depends on the power demand of the car. So that's why there's no need to have 100% of quick chargers, because if we have too many quick chargers, there will be onerous power demand on the building. So that's why in the new guidelines, and in future we're going to revise the Hong Kong planning standard and guidelines. There will be a certain proportion of medium chargers and quick chargers. We are now working on the amendments, so we'll do some calculation to see what is the right percentage. As for geographical distribution of chargers across the territory, yes, we will make sure there will be a reasonable distribution of chargers in the entire charging network. We're still only working on the preliminary plan, so we need more time before we could begin an announcement for the public. For metered parking spaces, can we add charger? Well, technically it's not challenging, but it's all a question of management. Let's say if there's a non-EV taking up a metered parking space with a charger, then again it's a question of management. We believe that when the number of EVs has reached a certain level, that is when most cars are EVs, then there may be a demand for charging at metered parking spaces, and then there'll be right time for us to consider installing these facilities. Thank you. Mr. Lau Kok Fen. Yes, the Bureau has done much in this respect. We see continuous rise in the number of EVs as a percentage of the entire car fleet. That's good progress. But then for taxis and PLBs, electric ones only account for about 1% of the respective fleet, and that's disappointing. I understand the government is taking certain measures. For example, by the end of 2027, there will be 700 e-buses and 3,500 3,000 e-taxis. And also there will be 100% loan guarantee scheme for taxi owners to switch to e-taxis. So the government has various measures to encourage the switch to electric cars. So, but my question is, for franchised bus services, would you set a certain target to increase the percentage of e-buses in a fleet to a certain percentage by a certain year? And then what about the progress? And have you actually studied how many chargers need to be built in different districts? So what I'm asking is whether there is a comprehensive plan to promote the switch to electric vehicles for public transport. Our colleagues will give you more details in the PowerPoint. We have briefly explained that for commercial vehicles, in the past, there were challenges in identifying suitable models for use in Hong Kong. So that's where we encountered difficulties, but there's been a breakthrough recently. Now we have regard to the Hong Kong situation, we have adopted Hong Kong specifications in ordering e-buses. So that's a breakthrough now. That's why we're able to set a timetable. That is by 2027, there will be 700 e-buses on the road in Hong Kong. But then for taxis, apart from the availability of models, there is also challenge in respect of charging. That's why today we've said much about charging network for taxis. And we have actually come up with a concrete plan. So the taxi trade has expressed interest. There are actually 2 e-taxis on the road already, and there'll be more on the road soon. So we have set a target. That is by 2027, there will be 3,000 e-taxis, because we have to make sure there is available suitable models and also a charging network. And we have made some progress in that respect. Thank you.
Let me supplement. We can try to look at public transport and EPC's development, because there are a lot of different private car models. That is why there is such a significant increase in the number of EVs, that is doubling every year. We are now in touch with the manufacturers of electronic vehicle manufacturers for them to design models that are suitable for Hong Kong, because there is time needed for the manufacturers to design models that are suitable for Hong Kong. For minibus, the case is quite different. For the applications that we've received, most of the manufacturers come from Hong Kong. So for the construction of supplementary facilities for e-minibus, it may be quicker because the manufacturers from locally. Tony Chair, please. For producers' pay scheme, the development is rather mature. I hope that you will impose fee on charging as soon as possible. This is my first point. This can also encourage private sector to provide charging facilities. Another point, in the coming 3 years, there will be 7,000 parking spaces built, and you will impose fee on those charging facilities at the parking spaces. For the rapid testing scheme, what is the number like? You mentioned that you are looking into it. I hope that when the results are out, please let us know, because the electricity and price for the quick charging is quite significant. I concern about taxis, because there is a target of 3,000 e-taxis in 2027. For LPG filling stations, there are often long queues. We have to look at the full picture. Now, you have a trial scheme, which is a good thing. As for site selection, it was used to be at the places where there are a lot of taxis. Now you plan to test the chargers at Sai Kung. I hope that the case with the LPG taxis will not repeat. Now, I would like to talk about paragraph 10 of the paper. There are some parking spaces in the government premises. There are some smart devices installed where you know how many parking spaces are available, such that you do not have to spend a long time locating parking spaces. Can you tell us perhaps where or which parking spaces are equipped with chargers? Because sometimes we have to drive around to see where the chargers are. Can you improve on this? Thank you. Secretary, please. This is a technical problem. Perhaps I invite my colleague to respond. Perhaps I'll respond to the queuing problem. For charging of e-taxis, charging can be done in reservation, so people can reserve spots for charging. Because charging needs time, maybe 20 to 30 minutes, we will design queuing mechanism for these places such that taxis will not have to queue on the street. So when we design the charging station, we will take these arrangements into account. On the application, I asked my colleague to supplement. For EV charging easy application, there will be real-time information for people to see how many parking spaces are available and also how many parking spaces with chargers are available. And we have also handed such information to the Transport Department. I want to know where the chargers are when I go to the parking car spaces or car park. Can you show the number of parking spaces with chargers or those without chargers at the car parks? You only show the number of chargers available at the EV Charging Easy application. I mean, when you get to the car park, I will talk to the Transport Department if we can provide more information. Next, Mr. Gary Zhang. In Finance Committee and different occasions, there's been mentioned that there are some chargers at government premises, car park, but civil servants are unable to use those chargers. I think that civil servants who drive e-vehicles should be allowed to use those chargers at the car parks under the government. I would also like to talk about charging standard. For EVs manufactured in the mainland, some salesperson told me that when the EVs go to the mainland, they cannot use the chargers because when they go to the mainland, they can only use the standard charging facilities. I would like to understand what the difficulties are. If we purchase a EV in Hong Kong and they cannot use the medium or quick chargers in the mainland, this is quite unreasonable. Another question on hydrogen energy. What is the source of hydrogen and what is the supply situation like? Is the government discussing with the power companies for heavy vehicle operators, if they want to change to heavy vehicles, where should they look for the hydrogen fuel? Another question. A lot of the e-PCs are approved by the Transport Department, but what about the e-CVs? Because it's quite difficult to obtain approval from the Transport Department for this type of vehicle. If we want to introduce hydrogen fuel heavy vehicles, is there a designated team for the operators to obtain approval for particular kinds of models? Secretary, please. For civil servants who want to have their vehicles charged at government premises, it is possible. According to our internal guidelines, they can charge their vehicles at the government car parks. But we are still installing some chargers at some government car parks. And sometimes there is insufficient chargers. That is why we only allow government fleet to charge their vehicles at those car parks. And in the future, with democratization, we will charge fees for charging e-vehicles in government car parks. We do have an interdepartmental task force led by the EEB to promote hydrogen fuel vehicles. So if some operators would like to have their hydrogen vehicles approved, we will have a streamlined procedures for that. As for other questions, I invite my colleague to respond. Dr. Leung, please. Thank you, Chair. For charging standards, there is only one kind of charging standard in the mainland, but for Hong Kong, we have different charging standards for vehicles sold in Hong Kong, and we are adopting the IEC standard. For Japan, they adopt the charter mode. In Hong Kong, we do not have any restrictions. For chargers installed in Hong Kong, we will accommodate for vehicles coming from the mainland. So at the charging facilities at the border, we will accommodate both IEC and the mainland standard. For Hong Kong vehicles going into the mainland, because the plug is different, so they cannot use the plug in the mainland. So maybe we will design some adapter, some kind of current adapter. We will have to wait for the design from the sector such that vehicles can be charged in the mainland. As for the supply of hydrogen, there are some operators or suppliers in Hong Kong that can provide hydrogen. And there are also some fossil fuel companies that transport or import hydrogen from overseas. As for local power companies, they will extract some hydrogen from their reserve to provide for hydrogen fueling. Thank you. Next, Mr. Kok Wai Keung. Thank you, Chair. I hope that the department can encourage more mainland manufacturers to take part in the Hong Kong market, because we've noticed that the models and development of EVs are quite rapid, but as the mainland use left-hand drive vehicles, and because we have such significant demand, or there is insignificant demand in Hong Kong, so they do not want to come to Hong Kong. But actually, a lot of Hong Kong drivers would like to purchase EVs manufactured in the mainland. As we all know, for the popularization of EVs, it has to do with the comprehensiveness of the charging network, and they are closely related. This is also an egg and chicken question. And we do have a target that by 2035, we will start registering new fuel-propelled vehicles. So there is a fixed target for that. Currently, in terms of the charging network, do we have to set out a long-term goal? And what will the supply be like after 2035? Do you have a preliminary estimation on that? My last question on choice. When we talk about charging network, we often think about chargers. But in overseas, they make use of smart lampposts. Will we consider such mode of charging as well? This is to provide more options for people. My third question on taxis. Currently, the taxis will only have to charge or have their gas filled for just a few minutes. If in the future they will have to charge for 20 to 30 minutes, will the queue be worsened? Do you have any estimation on the time? Because there are different shifts that the driver will have to take, and during peak hours, it's very difficult to accommodate. Are you well prepared?
回應之前呢，我先話
Before the Secretary responds, let me first draw the line. There are still members waiting to speak. Mr. Secretary, on e-taxis, will we say the same problems when we with LPG taxis? Well, in paragraph 24, we mentioned that we need to provide 1,400 quick chargers for the taxi charging network. In terms of number, we don't think the previous problem will be repeated. Can we actually achieve that? Well, compared to LPG taxis, for chargers, they have an advantage. For example, with LPG filling stations, they need to be far away from residential developments because of the explosion risk. So that's why LPG filling stations are usually in remote locations. But then for charging station, there's no need for that. So there could be a more even distribution of charging stations. And also we're going for marketization. There will be private operators providing the charging stations. That's why we are confident that we'll be able to meet the demand. As for the long-term demand for chargers, because there'll be a gradual increase in the number of electric vehicles, so therefore we're going for marketization to meet the demands in future. We believe that is the most effective way to make sure there is a comprehensive territory-wide charging network that is developed in tandem with the increase in the number of EVs. Now, when there are more and more EVs and fewer conventional vehicles, we'll consider various options for charging facilities. The primary consideration is that there must not be any obstruction to traffic. Mr. Kenneth Lau, he's not here, then Mr. Gary Chen. Now, we see that for the first time there are more private EVs registered than fuel-propelled private cars. So that means the government's policy of promoting private EVs is successful. The one-for-one replacement scheme has been appealing to car owners, so they are prepared to switch to EVs. But then next year, if this one-for-one replacement scheme will not be extended, then I'm worried there will be a reverse cycle, and there may be free fall in the orders of private EVs, because it's not just about the cars. It's about the battery repair and the whole ecosystem for supporting EVs. So you need to tell the sector as soon as possible whether you're going to extend the one-for-one replacement scheme. It's not just about those who wish to buy cars, but the whole green sector may be affected. So that's the first thing. Secondly, the EHSS, well, that's a good scheme. Many housing estates already install chargers. Can you give us a list of those who've been approved, which have received approval under the EV charging at home subsidy scheme? And then thirdly, you are going to go for a marketization. That means we'll be charging for charging services. Well, I think it's the right move, because for 10 years, EV owners have enjoyed free charging. And then the government has already been saying since last year that soon we're going to charge for charging services. So most car owners are probably prepared for that. And right now, the rate is about $1 or $1.50. But compared to certain brands of quick chargers, they're charging $3 or $4, so it's very competitive. And compared to fuel prices, just 1/10 of the price. So I think you ought to charge a fee that will help to promote the a quicker development of the charging network, and also for EV owners. It's also good for them to be able to use public resources in a more ethical manner. Now, for e-taxis, we've been asking whether there are sufficient charges for e-taxis, but perhaps before that we have to consider, first of all, if the taxi trade is prepared to switch to e-taxis. I understand that the trade practice is usually they will run the taxi to the ground. It cannot be repaired anymore before they will buy a new taxi. So the 100% loan guarantee scheme, is that enough of an incentive for the 14,000 taxi owners to switch to e-taxis? That's my concern. So on the replacement of conventional taxis with e-taxis, apart from offering a loan, are there other incentives? Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chen, for your question. About the one-for-one replacement. Well, it's been very important in promoting the popularization of EVs. We will be making an announcement at an appropriate juncture in relation to the fate of the scheme. As for taxis, how do we promote the switch to e-taxis? Well, you can see that around the world, automobile makers have actually set a time frame for stopping the manufacture of fuel-propelled vehicles. So therefore, in the foreseeable future, EVs will become the only option for buyers. As for the taxi trade, we'll see how we could help the taxi trade to make the switch. As I mentioned, the models available, the charging network, and difficulties encountered in borrowing, making loans and so on. So we will look at all that, and then we will consider the actual situation, and then we'll make a decision on that. Next, Mr. Kitson Yang. Thank you. Now for the popularization of EVs, the key is convenient charging network. Now I see that on the mainland, there are many on-street parking spaces equipped with chargers. In Hong Kong, now by 2035, you will no longer register fuel-propelled vehicles. That means there will be more and more EVs. That means there will be a stronger demand for charging facilities. At parking spaces in car parks or on street, there will be a need for chargers. Now, for private car parks, there's nothing we can do. But then for government facilities and also on-street parking spaces, can you consider installing chargers? It's rather common on the mainland. They already have chargers in outdoor spaces. So can we do the same? And there's mention of the EV charging at home subsidy scheme. HSS has been a very successful scheme. There have been 2 phases. But then I mentioned that there are many single block buildings with outdoor car parks. They need your subsidy the most, but they don't get any subsidy. The government said that if there is any money left in the scheme, then you will consider these car parks. But the scheme, there's overwhelming response to the scheme. Will there be any money left? Now in Kowloon City, my constituency, we see the highest number of single block buildings with open air car parks. So will you enhance the scheme so for developments that are eligible, they could also install chargers, the charging infrastructure? Now, third point, now for phones first, we started with charging through a cable, but now there's contactless charging. So what about EVs? Will the Bureau consider subsidizing studies for contactless charging for EVs? I'm sure that's a huge market. So eventually we can have contactless charging technology for EVs. Well, that will be a great achievement, because it's not possible for us not to have charging facilities at car parks. So if we can have contactless charging, it will be a great advancement. So we're talking about supporting the development of the entire supply chain of EV, so it can help local universities to work on this technology. It may be a new, entirely new opportunity for Hong Kong. Well, contactless charging, I'm sure it's going to happen in future. We have a green, low carbon research fund. We could support local universities, and we will liaise with local universities, see if they're interested in any such research projects about open air car parks and installation of chargers. The 3 new buildings with car parks without covers, and I'll ask my colleagues to answer that. Yes, under the current EV charging and home subsidy scheme, EHSS, if the 60% of the parking spaces are out in the open, then they're not eligible. It's because usually it involves excavation, and the cost will be high. That's why we first start with car parks with covers. But then we have received 680 applications under the HSS. We have more or less reached our target, and if there's still surplus fund, we then consider car parks without covers. Well, we will actively consider that. For government public chargers, we have deployed over some $100 million, and so we've added another 1,000 medium chargers. That's why in total we have 5,000 chargers at government car parks. But as the Secretary pointed out, we'd like to go for marketization future that will help to expand the charging network much quicker. But what I want to say is that for on-street parking spaces, could you also provide chargers? Because on the mainland, they're already doing it. So there is a reference point for you. We're going to go to the Greater Bay Area today. I wonder if the Secretary would join us. If so, you could take a look at how it's done on the mainland. Next, Miss Judy Chan, also is not here, and then Dr. Simon Lee. Thank you, Madam Chair. Now, I must acknowledge the effort of the Bureau in promoting the popularization of EV, but then, of course, you face many challenges. Now there are some 72 brands or models available, but then the Hong Kong market is too small, so not many manufacturers are keen to export their cars to Hong Kong. And then, of course, there's another constraint in relation to power supply, and then the type of connectors too is a challenge. So I have a number of questions and suggestions. First, about taxis. I have done an in-depth study together with the taxi trade to see how it would be easy for them to charge their cars if they switch to ETVs. Perhaps the airport is a good choice, because there are many vehicles, taxis waiting there. If there are sufficient charges at the airport, it will really help taxi operators, and that would be a good incentive for them to switch to e-taxi. So sufficient charges at the airport is my first suggestion. Second point, we've also done some detailed, in-depth surveys for the bus companies. The concern, from the business point of view, if they use fuel now, they could compare prices among different fuel suppliers. But then if they use electricity, there's no way they could compare prices of power supply. That means it will affect their procurement decision. And that's why bus companies are deterred to some extent. Now, are there other options apart from the 2 power companies? Because we are so close to Shenzhen, perhaps at the boundary, there could be some sort of power cables, so bus companies could use power supply from Shenzhen. Of course, it's a complicated issue, but it's something we could consider. That's the second point. Third point. Now, for electric or hydrogen vehicles, well, we're talking about new technology that's advancing rapidly. There could be some old EV models. They are just emerging, but they are also going on decline. You could put it that way. Hydrogen cell fuel vehicles is an important development, but then in Hong Kong we may not be able to use hydrogen in certain circumstances because it's probably more dangerous. And then for hydrogen cars, usually we're talking about heavy vehicles. We don't know if hydrogen is really suitable for Hong Kong altogether. We still need to do some studies. So maybe there's a need for studies in future when we talk about clean fuel, clean energy vehicles. Doesn't matter if we talk about small cars or heavy vehicles. Maybe we have to consider the percentage of fuel type, or so perhaps these are the 3 points I'd like to make. Thank you.
Secretary, please. Thank you for your suggestions. To provide chargers at the airport, we think that this is worth exploring because there are a lot of taxis queuing at the airport. As for bus, can we provide chargers at the boundary? This is a rather complicated issue because it doesn't have to only do with the technical issues. It also has to do with agreements with the two bus companies. We will have to look into that further. But we do encourage the bus companies to lower their cost for charging because most of the bus charge at night. Maybe they can share the chargers with other modes of transport at the daytime. Some companies also say that they may use other forms of energy generation method. As for the ratio of hydrogen, for light vehicles, the use of batteries is quite mature already. So we will not be developing a hydrogen fueling network for light vehicles. But there are a lot of heavy vehicles using hydrogen, especially for cross-border heavy vehicles. So we do need to adopt trial schemes for wide use of hydrogen in heavy vehicles. As for the ratio, we will have to see the results of the trial schemes before we can formulate the ratio between hydrogen and electricity. That is why we need so many trial schemes. Next, Dr. Junius Ho. Chair, I'm not happy with the progress. As for the climate action plan, the Hong Kong's climate action plan 2050, we target to have carbon neutrality before 2050. But with your plan, I am repulsed by the two figures that you propose. At paragraph 4, in 2027, there will be 3,000 e-taxis. You make a big fuss out of bus, but there are only 700 e-buses by then. There is such a slow progress. There are some cabled chargers in the mainland, but they are now electrified, and they are using e-buses all across the country. And you're talking about 3,000 taxis in 2027 and 700 e-buses in 2027 as well. How can we accept such figures? How do you achieve carbon neutrality? Do you know how expensive the fuels are in Hong Kong? It's $5 per liter. For retail, it's $23 or $24 per liter. It's almost $6 per liter. Some people say that cost come from the land price. Can you advance the time for conversion of petrol filling station to charging stations. The views in Hong Kong is the most expensive in the world. You say that you're making progress, but in reality, the plan is so slow. In 2027, there has to be at least 10,000 e-taxis in Hong Kong, regardless of the brands. It could be BYD or other brands. You have to make the purchase. Why can you not do it? You're just next to the mainland. And the BYD manufacturing facilities are just across us. Why do we have to use double-deckers? We're not in London. We can use single-deckers. Other than rush hours, the occupancy of double-deckers are only 15 to 20%. It's such a waste. You have requirements on the frequency on the bus service, but the loading of each bus is only 15 to 20%. You are wasting fuel and money. And we have to provide subsidy on the transportation fees. I recommend adopting single-deckers, single-deckers. You are subsidizing 37 or 36 e-buses. Just ask them to make the purchase themselves. They have so much money. I hope that in 2027, there will be at least 3,000 e-buses. 700 is not enough. Your third target for e-motorcycles. There are so many of them on the mainland. This is for people to use. I have only 3 targets. For the targets of taxis and buses is not sufficient. Third, encourage people to drive e-motorcycles or just use bicycles. That's my suggestions. Secretary, please. We've heard your views. We're anxious about our progress as well. But there are things that we have to discuss with the sector on the feasibility and the transportation policy. We hear your views and we will work on that. One more thing. This is not the first time we discuss e-bus. We've been talking about it for over 10 years. Some excuses that you've given is the humidity of Hong Kong and the hilly terrain of Hong Kong. But there are so many e-buses running on the mainland. We do not have to have double-deckers. We can have single-deckers. Thank you. It's my turn. Secretary, I have a few points to make. For one-for-one replacement scheme, as mentioned by a few members, it's a very successful scheme. It has encouraged a lot of people to convert to EVs. You say that you will be announcing a plan in due course. Does that mean that we will have some good news? I hope that you can announce as soon as possible such that we can prepare. My second point, we'll have to integrate into the development of the Greater Bay Area. There will be a lot of vehicles traveling across Hong Kong and the mainland. Charging standard is a problem. If the vehicles can only be charged in Hong Kong but not in the mainland, how do we achieve this 1-hour living cycle? This is the issue that we have to solve. We should discuss with the mainland if we can achieve a single standard charging scheme. Third, I support the marketization of charging services. This is very important. But if we have to achieve this, then we need the business sector to make investment. And we have to make the vision clear. That is why you need to announce the one-for-one replacement scheme as soon as possible. There are also some difficulties that they face. They will have to identify land for that. So the subsidy scheme by EPD is not enough. It may involve other government departments. In this respect, will you have an interdepartmental working group for the marketization? Another point that I worry about is the power supply. As the vehicles in the future will be EVs or vehicles using clean energy, there could be a bottleneck because there has to be charges across 18 districts in Hong Kong. If in some places there cannot be chargers installed, can you make a plan on that for places that do not have enough power supply as a whole? I hope that the market and the government can work together. I hope that all taxis will be electrified and all buses will be electrified as well. There has to be chargers before the conversion. The taxi trade has talked to us multiple times that they want to change to e-taxis, but you have to tell them whether or not there will be a quick chargers network. So there is a basket of factors or problems that you have to solve. Thank you. Secretary, please. Thank you for your questions. I understand that the land issue with chargers is the work of many different departments. We have discussed it. EEV will be the leader in the interdepartmental working group to solve the problems that you've raised. I hope that we can expedite the progress of solving these issues. As for the charging standard across Greater Bay Area, this is a problem that we have to solve, but we need time. As we are using right-hand drive vehicles, there will not be a lot of models manufactured in the mainland that can cater for Hong Kong. But some manufacturers would like to have their cars sold in right-hand drive markets. Maybe we can also accommodate mainland standard in Hong Kong. We will look into that. As for power supply, we will have to ensure sufficient supply of power. The comprehensive power supply across the territory is enough, but for some particular places, there may be insufficiency. But when we develop the charging network, we will be installing chargers at places with enough power supply. As for those with insufficient power supplies, the power companies will reinforce the power supply to those places before we install chargers. So we will be expanding progressively, and we will work with the power companies. Secretary, when you talk about marketization, there are some companies who would like to invest in the sector that say that if the two power companies participate in the installation of chargers, there is conflict of interest. Will it impact the competitors? This is a problem that we have to think about. Of course, we want the power companies to help the companies or private sector to install chargers. But these are the questions that I've received. I hope that this is not true. I hope that the department can work with the power companies because they are the power suppliers, but they are also a market player. So there could be conflict of interest. Secretary. I've heard your views. This is my first time hearing this. We will look into that. Thank you. Now we move on to the next agenda item, food waste collection and Old Park 2. There are two documents, administration papers and the papers prepared by the Secretary. I invite the government officials to enter to explain to us the item.
好，歡迎副局長同埋你嘅團隊。
Welcome Undersecretary and Assistant Director. Ms. Diane Wan and Dr. Vanessa Lau, the Assistant Director, Ms. Carrie Wang, Principal Environmental Protection Officer, and also Ms. Chang Ka-man, and Principal Environmental Protection are also with us. Undersecretary, please. Thank you. I will briefly talk about the topic, and then Assistant Director will walk us through the content of the papers with the aid of PowerPoint slides. This is to brief members on the food waste collection and progress of construction of Old Park 2. As we all remember, in 2021, we have promulgated Waste Blueprint for Hong Kong 2035. The blueprint in short, we set out the vision of waste reduction, resources circulation, zero landfill. In Hong Kong, there are about 3,400 tons of food waste disposed of at landfills, accounting for about 30% of the municipal solid waste. To achieve the goal set in the blueprint, the EPD has been promoting food waste reduction at source from various aspects. Providing food waste collection services and expediting the development of food waste treatment facilities so as to turn unavoidable food waste into energy and resources in a more sustainable way and alleviate the burden on landfills. In 2013, through Food Waste Hong Kong campaign and various activities, we encourage the sector to change the behaviors and to reduce the generation of food waste at source. To match with the commissions of Old Park 1 in 2018, the EPD launched the first phase of the pilot scheme on food waste collection. To collect food waste mainly from public markets and cooked food centers and schools. And in 2021, we have rolled out 4 contracts to collect food waste at restaurant clusters to provide door-to-door food waste collection. The areas covered are food manufacturers and aviation food suppliers and food and beverage trade. As for street-level restaurants that generate less food waste, we have adopted trial scheme and provide a food waste collection point for restaurants to take part in food waste collection. It includes 4 refuse collection points under FVHD. And we have put in place some food waste collection bins there. In Tai Po and Yuen Long, where there are restaurant clusters, we have placed food waste collection points. For food waste collection in housing estates, we want to encourage people to participate in food waste collection. And we also have to maintain a hygienic environment. So in 2020, through the fund, we have put in place some smart recycling bins at the PRH estates. And in October 2022, we have adopted a trial scheme on food waste collection in PRH estates to help public housing estates with a lot of residents install smart recycling bins to collect food waste. Apart from education and publicity, we have provided a green participation incentive scheme and green points to encourage people to collect food waste or recycle food waste. Apart from Old Park 1, we are planning more food waste treatment facilities. We are building an Old Park 2. It will be commissioned in 2024. It will enhance our capacity to treat food waste. We will also make use of sewage treatment works to use the food waste sewageless anaerobic co-digestion technology. The MSW charging scheme will be implemented by the end of this year. It will facilitate the commercial sector and people to make use of the food waste collection facilities. We target that the volume of food waste collected will be increasing progressively, and we will conduct follow-up work in due course. Now, Dr. Au will brief you on the details of the plan. I invite your comments and suggestions. Assistant Director, please. I will briefly talk about the details of the food waste collection and the progress of Old Park 2. As Under Secretary has said, the waste disposed of at the landfills is about 11,300 tons. 30% of it is food waste. In 2018, through a multi-pronged approach, the government has collected and reduced food waste volume. First of all, we have promoted a Foodwise Hong Kong campaign to reduce the generation of food waste. And for unavoidable food waste, we provide a collection service. So after collection, the food waste will be transported to Old Park and turn the waste into energy and resources. So we hope to reduce our reliance on landfills. I will briefly talk about the pilot scheme on food waste collection. In 2018, we have put out a pilot scheme to collect food waste at clustered premises, for example, at wet markets and food manufacturers, and we have expanded the scheme. And we have rolled out 4 contracts that cover all districts in Hong Kong. In Hong Kong and outlying islands in 2021 and 2022, these schemes are already commissioned. As for the rest of the 2 contracts in new territories, they are already commissioned. So we hope to expand the collection points and to increase the volume of food waste collected. For this pilot scheme, as Undersecretary has mentioned, the premises that have been covered are extensive. It's over 450 currently. We collect over 150 tons of food waste every day. Apart from enhancing the collection services, when we set out the collection points, we will provide support and training to participants. We will educate them and hand out pamphlets to teach them how to separate food waste. We also provide some transparent plastic bags and bins for them to place the food waste at a common collection point, so our colleagues will collect the food waste at those points. As mentioned, the food waste is putrescible and there is odor. So our contractors will collect food waste at a designated point. The transportation cost is high. So we try to reduce the cost. One of the ways is to adopt a food waste pretreatment facility. This can filter the food waste into some kind of slurry, which can be stored for a long period of time because there is a sealed storage tank and there is also an odor abatement system. So the contractors can use the suction tankers to transport the food waste every week, so it does not have to be done every day. Through these facilities, we can reduce the transportation cost and increase the cost effectiveness. So for the CSD venues and some malls, we have put out these trial schemes. If the result is good, we will promote it to more facilities or venues. Other than commercial and industrial sector, we also promote food waste collection in households because it accounts for 70% of the food waste. In 2022, we started this trial scheme on food waste collection in PRH estates. In first stage, we went to 5 housing estates involving 34 buildings. We have put in place some smart recycling bins to collect food waste. They're also equipped with the odor abatement system and an overflow prevention system. When it's about to overflow, it will inform the contractors for them to collect the food waste. And there is also a green point scheme to encourage residents to take part in the trial scheme. In March, we started the second phase in 4 housing estates involving 32 buildings. And we have also put in place some smart recycling bins there. We target that in 2023 to 24, 100 buildings will be participating in the trial scheme. Here are the details of our trial scheme. We teach the residents how to use the recycling bins. And there is also a promotion team to teach them how to separate food waste. Apart from PRH estates and private housing developments, we also promote the use of smart bins technology in 2020. The recycling fund also reserved 100 million to subsidize the smart recycling bins, and we have approved 28 applications. And they're also equipped with green dollars points to encourage residents to recycle their food waste. As for commercial and industrial sector, it is quite challenging in terms of food collection at those places. At some refuse collection points, we put some smart recycling bins there for the surrounding restaurants to place their food waste there. There are 56 restaurants that have been participating, and we have collected 14 tons of food waste. And we target that in 2023, we will put in place smart recycling bins at other refuse collection points for restaurants to hand over their food waste and put their food waste in our smart recycling bins. We have also started another trial scheme on restaurant clusters in Taipo and Yunlong. Where there are a lot of restaurants, we will put in place refuse waste collection points. And we have some mobile vehicles and common collection points to help them recycle food waste. We also have some publicity and education work and food waste bins for them to accumulate the food waste. And we help them recover at some points or at the restaurants. With the expansion of recycling network, we need to enhance our food waste treatment capacity. In 2018, OPARC 1 was commissioned, and in 2024, OPARC 2 will be commissioned as well. It adopts an anaerobic digestion technology. It can handle 300 tons of food waste every day and turn waste into renewable energy and compost. Because land is very valuable in Hong Kong, we will use sewage treatment works to use the anaerobic digestion technology to enhance our capacity in treating food waste. In new development areas, we will establish food waste pretreatment facility and anaerobic digestion facilities. And we target that in mid-2030s, we can handle 1,500 tons of food waste every day. That is the upper limit of our treatment capacity. Thank you.
5 members would like to speak. Professor Lau Chi-Pang, Ms. Chen Yit-ming, Mr. Tony Chen, Ms. Carmen Ken, and myself. 4 minutes each. Professor Lau Chi-Pang. Thank you, Madam Chair. I support the old Park 2. You know, we are a gourmet paradise. There's a huge quantity of food waste. And you know, at restaurants, they will only probably use half of a catty of vegetable. The other half is thrown away. And then we have soup, and then we throw away the ingredients afterwards. And so it's a green practice to turn such in the past, you know, in old days, such food waste was used as animal feed. That's a really green approach. But now we're told that about 50% of food waste, or 1,300 hungs, could be handled. That's a world standard. Is that your vision, or do you have a plan to actually achieve that target? Maybe in markets or in households, you could collect the food waste, and then by 2030 there will be a comprehensive food waste collection and treatment plan. Third question, you have OP1 and LP2. For the fertilizers produced, where do they go? It seems that for the agricultural sector in Hong Kong, they're moving towards high technology. So where do the fertilizers go? Can the general public have access to that? Because, you know, people like to plant plants at home, and now you see there's a market for organic fertilizers. I'm involved in such trade as well. But let's say at the greener community stores, perhaps fertilizers could be packed into small packets for free distribution to the public. Now, of course, the public would benefit from them, but it's also a form of education. That means for the soup ingredients that are disposed of, they will end up being fertilizers at community stores. So that will mean we are able to engage the public better, and then we'll be able to achieve the targets in 2030. Now, in mid-2023, hopefully, we'll be able to treat or handle 1,500 metric tons of food waste. We have looked at the experience in other places. Usually, they'll be able to collect about half of the food waste disposed of for treatment. Now, if we want to reduce food waste, we want to separate food waste and then treat it, then we will actually try to support such facilities. But then we need the cooperation of the public for these efforts to work. So that's why publicity and education is important. We need the public to support our effort to collect food waste for recycling. For Old Park 1, in 2022, we were able to produce about 2,000 tons of compost. And then in Old Park 1, there's an old farm. So there's production of compost on site. And then some of that is used for greening, landscape, and other facilities. About 80% is for landscape purposes, because you know, the FHD has a demand for such compost, and then about 20% of the compost is used for agricultural production. I wonder if my colleagues have anything to add. Yes, as the Perm Secretary pointed out, as Undersecretary pointed out, about 80% of the campus is now used for our landscape in Hong Kong, and then 20% on agricultural production. We also work with farms on promoting organic farming. Is it possible to spare a small quantity of the compost for use by the public? There's no need to add too much of the compost, but then it carries great significance with this initiative. Yes, thank you very much for your brilliant suggestion. In fact, for Old Park 1, we do arrange tours, visit tours by the public and students. Perhaps we could use this as a souvenir for people to take away. So it's a good suggestion. Now, if I have to go to OP1, of course, it's fine. But what about the green community stores? You know, maybe you could put a box there, and then maybe it's just a teacup full of compost in each pack, and people can just pick it up for their own plants at home. Well, that's a good suggestion, actually, because many people do have plants at home. You know, last time you gave me some compost, and I shared it with my colleagues here in the council. So many people would actually be interested. So it's a good suggestion. Dr. Au? Now, people can exchange their green dollars for different items. Perhaps we could make the organic compost as one of the item that is after recycling. I clock up green dollars, and I can use them to exchange to change into something useful at home. Ms. Chen, you may now first will extend the meeting for 15 minutes. I don't think no one will deny the contribution of Old Parks in their initiative of turning waste to energy. Now, Old Park 2 is near Kulong Hang Kong Po. That's the construction of the new police training ground. Now, Old Park 2 will be commissioned in 2024. Old Park 2 is close to the boundary. It's only 1.7 kilometers from the Lowell cross-boundary point. From Mangkam Toll, it's 1.2 kilometers. It's also 1.3 kilometers from the Shenzhen River. So it's so close, that means that people could just walk across the boundary. So what I'd like to propose is that the government needs to consider the positioning of OPAC 2 in its medium to long-term operation. You know, the North Metropolis will be the new driving engine for Hong Kong, and it's going to promote integration between Hong Kong and Shenzhen. So there will be a free flow of people, capital, and goods between Shenzhen and Hong Kong. Now, OPAC 2 is in Shalang, close to Shenzhen. It will be commissioned in 2019. But then, the OPAC 2 project was initiated in 2019. At that time, we didn't have the Northern Metropolis development strategy. But now, Shaling is no longer just any vacant site near the boundary, but it will be development area, and we believe there will be much room for cooperation between Shaling and Shenzhen. And later on this year, the government is going to announce the action plan for Northern Metropolis. So there will be more details later. This paper is on OPAC 2. I'm not against the collection of food waste and recycling food waste, but I'm just worried in future this project will cause embarrassment. That's why I hope the government will consider the long-term positioning of this project in Shaling and Takuling, and then the government should also look at the positioning strategic documents such as landfills and other waste treatment facilities. They must be far away from the boundary so that they don't stand in the way of cross-boundary development, economic development. OPAC 2, it will be commissioned in 2024 on the environmental impact, traffic impact, and so on. We have already done assessments, and so and the assessments outcome is positive. There will be greening measures as well. Now, for the Northern Metropolis development, what will be the positioning for green facilities against the background of that development strategy. I'm sure the government is well aware of that. In future, when there is opportunity, we could consider the matter further. Mr. Tony Chair, yes, I'd like to follow up on a number of points. Paragraph 23, page 7, OPAC 3, or page 8 even. Now it seems that originally OPAC 3 is going to be located at Shek Kong, Yunlong, but the feasibility study shows that the site is not suitable. So will this project be aborted? The government is committed to providing more land for development purposes. While land resources are scarce, yes. So you'll be making available more sites for development. That's your objective. But what about this OPAC 3? And then second question, for private businesses turning waste to energy and so on. We're told before there was not enough supply of food waste for supporting the operation of such facilities. So do we just leave it to the government alone to take up this task? What about a private market? Could there be a viable private market? And then the secretary mentioned too with food waste. There are going to be 1,500 tons to be handled. Is that our ultimate target? Can we do better than others, or do we just follow what others are doing? Now, another point. In 2014, the government announced it's going to build 8 recycling resources centers. 2 centers have seen works commenced, but is that the end? Are you going to go further? Because then you said you will build 5 to 6 such resources centers, so is that going to be all? On private sector participation, I'll ask Dr. Au to supplement later. If I could just quickly respond to your points. First, OPAC 3 at Shek Kong, Yunlong. In the paper, what we want to say is that we have done a consultancy study. We find that if we develop OPAC 3 at that location, there would be immense technical challenges. First, it's a hilly terrain, and then there are natural stream courses straddling the site. So we need to do large-scale site formation. We need to divert the stream courses. Well, of course there are reasons, but does it mean that, okay, the site's not suitable, that means we will not have OPAC 3? That's really my question. Well, we mentioned the impact on the ecological system, and so it may not be cost effective. But what is important is that we could handle the food waste. In the paper, we say that we're going to make use of the sewage treatment works so to deal with slurry. So I'm running out of time. Does it mean that there will no longer be OPAC 3? It won't be at the site in Yunlong, and at other locations will there be OPAC 3? No. We've found that at sewage treatment works where there is the deployment of the anaerobic digestion facility, it will be more cost effective and also takes up less land space. So for the typo sewage treatment works, we have planned to expand it. And then for some of the existing sewage treatment works, or for future sewage treatment works, we'll also adopt the same technology. And then we will have enough capacity to meet the needs. Thank you. Ms. Carmen Ken, one more question. Well, I have asked my question, but because the last item overran, so that we don't have enough time for this item, but we need this important subject. Food waste, as is a heavy burden on landfill. So, just asking a simple question: does it mean that you're not going to build OPAC 3? You're going to replace that with other facilities? That's the first question. Second question: in 8 years, you're going to build 5 to 6 resource centers. What is the latest plan? Third point: private sector involvement. About in terms of waste, turning waste into energy and waste into useful materials. So does it mean that 50% of the food waste will be treated and that's it? That's the ultimate goal. Why don't you set a higher goal? Is that the usual international standard? So these are the questions. Well, maybe you can just answer these questions. I wonder if Dr. Au has anything to add. And perhaps as members suggest we're running out of time, perhaps we could provide information in writing after the meeting. Anything else, please?
嗰個50%。
A supplement on the 50% thing. We took reference from other cities in the world. If there is a compulsory food waste collection, then the recycling will be done better. If there is none, then the recovery rate will be less than 50%. Because this is a voluntary scheme, so at the starting stage, we would like to take the middle ground. So we set the target at 50%. Perhaps with the commission or implementation of MSW charging, the recovery rate will be increased. And by then, we may review the target. We will supplement in writing. We will follow up on that later. Ms. Carmen Khan. First, I would like to go to page 2. It is quite difficult for me to grasp the current situation by reading the papers supplied by the administration. I think it's more effective to use tables to illustrate the numbers. Now there are 3,400 tons of food waste disposed of every day. How much percentage of food waste will be reduced? There will be zero landfill in 2035, and we have a food waste policy earlier from 2014 to 2022 with the implementation of MSW charging. There will be a decrease of 10 to 15% of food waste generated, and the policy disappeared. And I fail to see the relation between different policies. Why can you handle 1,500 tons of food waste by 2035 or mid-2030s? In 2024, OPAR can handle 300 tons of food waste. Looking at the pilot scheme, there will be 150 tons that can be handled per day. For recovery rate at housing estates or restaurants, they are not calculated by days, but by projects. So it's very difficult for me to rationalize the collection rate of food waste per day. Is it because we can only handle 200 tons of food waste per day? That is why we do not collect a lot of food waste per day. I do not see how you can collect 1,500 tons of food waste by mid-2030s. So 1,500 tons of food waste is 50% of the over generation per day. Can you illustrate the numbers by tables such that we see that this goal of 1,500 tons is achievable? Chair, can you ask the Secretary to respond to the reduction of food waste? Secretary, is there any estimation on MSW charging? I will ask Dr. Au to respond. On OPAC 1, it can handle approximately 200 tons of food waste. At Taipo, the sewage treatment works, it can handle 50 tons of food waste. As for Old Park 2, it can handle 300 tons of food waste. So we have a plan of expanding the Taipo sewage treatment works along with other treatment works in Shatin, for example, and the ones in Hongshui, Kyo, Yunlong, south of Yunlong. We will be adopting the food waste sewage sludge anaerobic digestion technology there as well. So for Old Park 1 and Old Park 2 and the Taipo sewage treatment works, we can handle 600 tons of food waste. And we will handle additional food waste in other sewage treatment works in the future. For the daily demand and estimations after charging scheme is implemented, I invite the director to supplement. Thank you. Every day, we collect about 150 tons of food waste per day. That is under the voluntary collection scheme. We have done some publicity and education work with the residents and the commercial sector. This is the volume we collect per day. Compared with other cities and countries in the world, under voluntary collection scheme, at the starting stage, we collect about 5 to 6% of the food waste generated per day. We will progressively increase our treatment facility and treatment capacity. So we may increase the rate of collection from 10% to maybe 30 to 50% progressively. As for how we can raise the collection rate from 150 tons to 1,500 tons in the future, we need time for that. Taking reference from Korea, they switched from voluntary collection scheme to compulsory collection scheme. The collection rate increased significantly. We don't hope that we need to use 7 years as with the case in Korea. I hope that with the infrastructures ready and the recycling network and our communication with various stakeholders to encourage them to participate in the scheme, we can enhance the collection percentage. We will supplement in writing. Chair, we need a table for us to grasp the relationship between 200 and 300 in the Taipo and Shatin. There are a lot of figures. As for the collectible of a rate of 50%, can you use a table to illustrate the relationships between all the figures? The administration says that they will, on the 1st of August, implement the 354 plan and the regulation. Why will the regulation be enacted so quickly? As for the regulation amendment, it is to complement the commission of OPARC 2. Because before commissioning, there has to be some testing work on machines. We need to collect food waste for testing. So by mid this year, we will conduct some testing. So we hope that the amendment can commence on the 1st of August 2023. Next, Mr. Chan Xiu-hong. Thank you. I've extended the meeting. Maybe some members have asked similar questions. The question Ms. Khan put is what I concern of us as well. On the processing capacity of Hong Kong, of 1,500 tons. I hope that the administration can provide more information after the meeting. As for the selection of Old Park 3 site, the project had to be aborted because of the feasibility study of the site. I would like to know that while the administration says that the food waste, sewage, sludge, anaerobic co-digestion technology will take up less land, and the administration says that they will use this technology. And I would like to know what the future plan is like with this technology. Another point on household food waste collection. It targets private premises and PRH estates. I'm not sure if other members have asked similar questions. There are 3,003 new buildings. How do you process the food waste collected at these 3 new buildings? Will you put some collection points at street corners, like the case with the restaurant clusters? Secretary, please. Thank you. For PRH estates and private premises, we have put out some pilot schemes, but for 3 new buildings, there are some challenges. So for places where there are a lot of 3 new buildings, we will put in place some common food waste collection points for restaurants or residents to make use of the smart recycling bins to recycle food waste. And through the Environment and Conservation Fund, we will subsidize these projects. Perhaps the director supplements on the 3 new building issue. There are challenges with the 3 new buildings because there has to be a space for the recycling bins, and there are also challenges with the recycling and collection. So we try to put some common collection points at government premises near these 3 new buildings. At Green at Community, there are some larger facilities, and they are located near 3 new buildings, for example, in Shenhui-Po and Eastern District. Maybe we will put some smart recycling bins at these areas because food waste collection is more challenging than other types of recovery because it emits odor and we have to clear it out day by day. So we will promote the recycling of food waste after the trial schemes are completed. Lastly, it's my turn. As for food waste collection in Hong Kong, the situation is rather disappointing, I have to say this. We have been exploring it for some 10 years, but we are making very slow progress. Under great controversy, Old Park 1 was commissioned, and the overall resources center plan was passed. Old Park 1 and Old Park 2 are very expensive. With such large budget to handle such a small amount of food waste, there is great controversy, but we have no other choices, and we want to handle and process the food waste and find a way out for food waste. That is why we passed these, the commission of these parks. Old Park 1 capacity is not used up yet, and Old Park 2 is about to be commissioned. So that is why there are so many members who question about the food waste collection plan. With your presentation and the papers that you submit, I don't see a clear plan. Now we know that the site selection of Old Park 3 is not suitable. That is why we will not be commissioning the Old Park 3 or constructing it. And you will use the sewage treatment works to process or treat the food waste, and that is more cost effective. But you do not have any blueprint on the number of sewage treatment works and the timetable and the budget. And then you say that in mid-2030s we will treat some 1,500 tons of food waste per day. I don't know where the capacity comes from. Can you provide a more detailed kind of plan for us to see how you can make use of the sewage treatment works, and which sewage treatment works will you be using? Will these works be renovated to handle food waste, and how much food waste can these sewage treatment works be handled, and what is the cost like? We do not have any such information at hand. Second, now the sewage treatment works can handle food waste. How do you handle the food waste collection? Just now you mentioned about the MSW charging scheme, and with the scheme, more residents will be recycling food waste, but you need to have the capacity for residents to recycle food waste. The residents will have to drive their food waste to the green community for recycling of food waste. If there has to be compulsory food waste collection, what are we waiting for? If Korea has to put in place legislation for compulsory food waste collection, then perhaps we should do the same. I'm not very happy with the food waste collection strategy. You'd have to explain very clearly to members of the public and members at this panel by providing all these figures. It's not very convincing. It involves a legislative amendment. I don't see any objections from members on the legislative amendments. What's important is the overall plan. Will you have any information to supplement? Secretary, as I've mentioned, we will have some papers.
On OPAC 1, there are 200 tons, OPAC 2, 300 tons of capacity. As for the typo sewage treatment works, it can now handle 50 tons, and we're going to substantially boost the capacity there. As for the Northern Metropolis, say in Yunnan, Hongshui, Kiu, Yunnan South, there will be facilities. Actually, there's already preliminary planning for these facilities. So we'll be providing more and a paper later, so you will have a full picture of the handling capacity. Or treatment capacity. And as for the collection capacity, as the Assistant Director explained about the daily collection volume at the moment, it depends on progress, really, of our various plans. And also it depends on whether the public would support these initiatives. Now, we are still just doing trial schemes. We will closely monitor the development, and we'll see if we are able to collect sufficient food waste. We will provide information in writing later. Thank you. So we'll wait for the paper from the administration, and then I'll see if members consider it necessary to have another session on that. Okay? Thank you. That's all. So we now move on to item 5. Proposal on conducting a duty visit to mainland cities of the Greater Bay Area. Please refer to the 2 documents members might recall at the beginning of this session, where members expressed the wish for the Environment and Ecology Bureau to join us on mainland study visit. The paper is prepared. The administration has prepared paper to propose a duty visit from the 27th to the 29th of May. The details are in Annex 1 to the paper, Appendix 1 to the paper, and also there's a proposed visit program. So I want to ask members if you agree in principle to the proposals in the paper, and then we could seek approval from the House Committee for us to visit the Greater Bay Area from the 27th to the 29th of May. And also, Another point for members to consider is whether we should allow or invite members outside of this panel to join the visit. Now, this is a tight schedule, so we need to seek approval from the House Committee as soon as possible, and then the Secretariat could issue a circular inviting members to sign up for the tour. So there's no need. So we need members to indicate whether we support the proposals. Members, please, yes, Mr. Chen Xiu-hong. Yes, I think it's great to arrange a site visit to mainland cities. We could have a discussion with them after visiting the facilities on site. A 3-day visit is appropriate. Of course, it's a Saturday and Sunday, and mainland officials will have to receive us during the weekend, and it's kind of them to agree to do so. Now, I think either the Secretariat or the administration, I hope they will prepare some background information for us before the duty visit. For example, the Huawei Digital Power Auto Hill headquarters, featuring solar photovoltaic facilities and so on. So I'm very interested in that. I wonder if you've already, done a recce of the sites on the 31st of March, and so is it because you've already visited facilities, so that's why you think this visit program is appropriate for us? Then we could make reference to their experience. It will help to promote similar work in Hong Kong. Is that the case? Yes, the visit program is going to cover many different facilities. We must thank the administration for making the arrangement. We'll focus on various green facilities. For example, electric public transport facilities, the application of hydrogen energy technologies, and the PDF and so on. And also, we will visit the Daya Bay nuclear power plant, the Nanshan energy eco park, and so on. So it's a packed program covering many facilities. I'm sure non-panel members will be interested too. Well, it's a 3-day, 2-night program. We're in discussion with the relevant departments and parties. Of course, we have to wait for them to confirm the arrangement. So we're actually working on the program. Of course, we don't want to, get in the way of the work of the council. That's why we picked the weekend. Of course, it's not easy for you to make the arrangement. So thank you so much, Mr. Chen Pulang. Thank you, Madam Chair. I support the program. It's actually rather packed, so from 9 to 5 every day we'll be visiting different facilities. And I think the arrangement is also great because otherwise we won't be able to visit all these facilities in Hong Kong. So perhaps it's great that we have this program. Ms. Cameron Ken, yes, I also support this duty visit. On day one, public transport facilities in Guangzhou. Apart from that, can we also learn more about how technology is applied to, say, the public transport system? So the public could make use of technology for greener initiatives. So we'll see how technology supports green initiatives in the Greater Bay Area. So we will talk to the mainland to see how we could incorporate that into the program. So it seems that members are all in support of the duty visit, so we will seek approval from the HC as soon as possible. Any other business? Nothing under that? Oh, what about inviting non-panel members to join the visit? Non-panel members joining the visit. You support that? Okay, great. If there is nothing else on the AOB, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.